only drawing 6 amps and it's kicking out. Might be something wrong with the sensing thing. Should be able to pull 12 amps. Well, here's snowjoe 625E and it's all apart. Now, if you just loosen these handles right here on either side and flop the handle forward, like I did there, you can leave these alone because if they're corroded at all, you might break this plastic trying to loosen them. The ones up on top, they're easy. They kind of just, they have like some kind of a spring-loaded thing in here. You just flip it and flip this forward, the handle forward, and that gives you enough slack in the wires, these wires here, so that you can pull the whole motor unit. The entire motor unit comes away from this part. You don't have to take this piece off the handles. All you do is remove the screws, you know, the side piece on each one, and then you just need a Phillips screwdriver. You can get them all out, and then just move this piece forward from that part. And once you get inside here, it looks like this is a device to power the LED light. And this is a 15 amp automatic breaker. There is no thermal protection on the motor. This is the only protection for it. If it pulls more than 15 amps for any length of time, this will kick out. Problem with this one right now is, you know, you saw in the beginning of the video I had the clamp, the amp clamp on the line. It was pulling 6 amps and kicking out. So this thing's no good. If you look at the armature, it's a little bit dirty, and I'll clean it up with some 600 grit. I may also take the brushes out and have a look at them. On this model, they're held in by a couple of screws. I've noticed some other people repairing these things, and the brushes are just held in with some kind of I don't know, friction fit or something, and sometimes that can fail and the brush pops up. That can cause it to fail. Anyway, I'll take these out and show you what they look like. And I'm going to use some 600 grit. The armature looks pretty damn good, actually. Might not even bother cleaning it up. It actually looks, yeah, I think I'll leave it alone. And I'm going to bypass this thing for now. I was just going to put a piece of wire between it, but I might put a automotive 15 amp fuse in there and try and get it insulated, because the average automotive fuse, I'll just get one for you. That's a 15 amp automotive fuse, and I wouldn't trust that to insulate 120 volts from anything. They're really pushing your luck. So, you know, you can see how this thing is all in, has bakelite around it, and it's got some shrink wrap on there, and it just lays in there and flops around. It's not mounted to anything, but if you put something like this in there, you want to get it taped up really good. And if you're doing any of this kind of stuff, understand what you're doing, because if you put it together wrong and you don't have a good ground, you might end up getting a shock. Now you can see I peeled back the heat shrink, and this clip has a spring-loaded detent right here. You push that down. When you push that down, it'll release this thing. If you try to pry that clip off there, well, it won't come off, and well, I suppose it would if you eventually you could defeat that by prying hard enough. But what you have to do is get the that shrink wrap back, and just press that down with your fingernail, and it'll slide right off. And if you haven't got any shrink wrap to put it back together with, make sure you tape it up really well. If you do replace this with the proper thing, which I think you can buy from SnowJoe, make sure that you pay attention to which wire goes on which side. It says line and load. Line is the black wire that comes in. It's red actually on this one. And that's your line wire, and this black one is a load, and that goes out to the motor. And then the other one comes back, and these things are. You can see all these wires are split here. They're taking power off to this transformer, which, who knows, it probably cuts, this thing probably puts out, like a volt or whatever, just to run the LED lights. They don't require very high voltage. Anyway, that thing never did work on this thing. I don't know what's wrong. Never used the light anyway. Anyway, I'm going to put this automotive fuse in there, and then I'll show you what the brushes look like. Okay, there's the automotive fuse. That fuse might not even be any good. I'm just looking at it there now. I better check that out before I put this together. Anyway, I put the heat shrink on here, and I'll slide it down. But look at there isn't very much room between those two. For 110 or 120 volts, that's not very good. We'll get it all fixed up. At the end of the day, if these two come together, all you do is lose the fuse protection, as long as they don't touch anything else in the machine. That's why we'll get it taped up really good when we finish. So I took the retainer off, just two screws that hold that plate that holds the brushes down, this brush. And if you have a look there, see how much movement there is? That's how much tension there is on the spring. If you don't have any tension, it's because your brushes are wore out. There's lots of brush here, see? And then I've seen other models that have some goofy retainer that holds that brush down, and they sometimes fail, and the brush will pop up and it won't run. Here's a couple other things to think about if you got this apart. Have a look at the belt, make sure it's not chewed up, both of them. And this may be different than yours. I've seen others that have had these things apart, and they've got it looked like just one belt with some kind of a tensioner on here. These things I've had this one 4 or 5 years, and I beat the piss out of it. But you know, if you get your cord wound into it, or your kid's bicycle wheel or something, and stop the blade, let go of the trigger right away if you haven't busted it already, because once it stops, it's going to chew the shit out of things here. Otherwise, it's not in too bad a shape for the amount of work this thing has done. I've moved a lot of snow with it. Well, at least it works. We'll see. Don't know for how long. Hey, if you're going to try this thing out before you get it back together, make sure the blades aren't laying on the floor. I just put this thing on here so it couldn't bounce around too much. So that 15 amp fuse that I was trying to put on there was no good, so I put a 20 on it. You know, when you're using something like this, don't work it until the motor slows down, because when it does, it'll pull more amperage than it's designed for, and it'll overheat. Just learn how to use it, and the thing will... Well, this has lasted for years. I'm not kidding you, I've moved a lot of snow with this thing. Well, there's the taped up 20 amp fuse. And next thing is the motor cover. I've got parts laying all over the place. I'll try and show you a few things as I put it back together. It might be useful. You make sure you get this thing on here right. So it covers the motor, but it also helps the airflow. This is the fan right on the end here, this white piece. And if you don't get this thing down right, don't pinch the wires under it. Get it laying down on there. I'm going to have 2 hands for this. Before you tighten any of these screws down, make sure you've got this thing sitting down flush all the way around, because that airflow is necessary over the motor. There's no way I could put that together with the handles on it. I don't know, it was just too damn awkward. So I took the handles off, set it like that, and just dropped that clamshell on there like nothing. So I said you didn't have to take the handles off, but I guess you do to put it back together. This you got about 6 people. Okay, it's all back together. When you take this apart, make sure you know what some screws are different sizes. So pay attention to where the long ones come from. There's only a few. Also pay attention to the wiring. I got this wire on the other side of this, and I couldn't adjust, the handles wouldn't go together right. I had to take the handles off I could not put it together with these long handles on here. Trying to hold onto it with the handles up in the air was just impossible. I took the handles apart, so I just had these small pieces on. You can't put these handles on after you put it together. One of the bolts is not accessible, so you have to take it apart here. Anyway, pay attention to how each thing comes apart. Take a bunch of pictures or whatever, and maybe you'll have it. I'm taking it out and see what happens. Might be blowing snow here in 10 minutes. Well, you can see it's throwing some of that snow out there 30 feet. But I don't think it's made to move this heavy snow. But it's doing it. It's a lot easier than shoveling. You can just stand here for an hour and push it back and forth. I would say there's 14 inches, maybe 14 inches of snow, but it was deeper than that, but it's settled down. Pretty solid now. Don't run into the ladder foot with your snowblower. Makes a lot of noise, but it made it. Didn't wreck it. Well, it didn't wreck the blower. Maybe it wrecked the ladder foot. Who knows? That snow is not dry. It's blowing it to be held, but it's pretty heavy. That's where I hit the ladder on that corner there. That bloody thing is rugged. I might have tore a little bit, put a piece of that rubber off there. Maybe not, just kind of scuffed it up. And this thing is rugged as hell, actually. I don't know what the new ones are like, but this thing works like a bastard.